After this girl and her dad had to move, she noticed her father started to act strange. She saw him sneaking out to the shed at night. Her curiosity got the better of her as she went to investigate, but she couldn't have expected the sad reason behind her father's nightly visits. Girl sees father sneaking out to shed at night, then she discovers his sad reason. Emily and her father moved into their new house a couple of weeks before, but she was still getting used to it. It was a nice house, it just didn't feel like home. The move wasn't planned and happened very quickly, and she didn't fully understand why they had to move in the first place. Her dad told her it would just take some time to get used to it. But when would she finally be able to feel at home? She thought while lying in bed. Then, suddenly, her body froze. What was that? Shadows started dancing on her wall, and she heard weird sounds coming from outside. How could I get used to this? She thought. This shouldn't happen in a home, this wasn't normal. But what was this? First, there was the weird moving light, making the shadows on her wall dance, and then there was the weird sound. It sounded like there was a gigantic bee flying near her window. Curious about what could be producing these weird lights and noises, Emily gathered her courage and went to investigate. She put on her pajamas and crept out of her room and down the stairs, trying her best not to make it creak. Once she got downstairs, she was in for a surprise. Walking around in the living room, with a flashlight in hand, was her father. He left her eyesight for a moment and came back with a big box in his hands. What is he doing? She thought while watching her dad walk to the shed. Emily decided to take a closer look to find out. She didn't dare to open the back door until she was sure her father was inside the shed. Then she quickly went through and silently closed it. Why was her father hauling boxes so late at night? She thought while getting closer to the shed. Then she heard the sounds again. Emily realized the sounds she was scared of were being produced by her father. She was very confused. What was he doing in there, and why did he do it so late at night? She was shocked by her own thoughts. What if this was the reason they moved? He never gave her a solid reason. Determined to find out what he was doing, she crept closer and closer. She ran ideas through her head for possible explanations, but couldn't come up with anything. She had no clue about her father's behavior and started to worry a little. He started acting strange just before they moved here, she thought. The sounds kept echoing through the garden. He was quite busy. Eventually, she arrived at the shed and let out a sigh of relief for getting there without being caught. She carefully walked over the porch toward the window where she could try and look, but of course, the windows were tinted. Due to the tint, Emily couldn't exactly make out what her father was doing inside the shed. But it looked like he was making something. She saw his shadow standing next to a table, and on top of that table stood a big and square object on which he was working. Okay, he's making something, Emily thought. That's not that weird, right? But why is he doing it so late at night, and what's with the boxes? The longer she thought about it, the more reason she had to think it was weird. Was her father trying to hide something from her? Emily looks around, searching for other possibilities to find out what her father is doing inside. She had never paid much attention to the shed before, and she now realized there was only one option for her to find out what was happening inside. She had to be in it. While she was deep into her thoughts, Emily didn't realize the sound had stopped, and the shadow figure of her father stopped moving. She heard an owl hoot and suddenly realized the sound was gone. Did he hear me? She thought. Not noticing that the shadow moved toward the door she sat next to. At the last possible second, she saw him, and she ducked and crawled away as fast and silently as possible. If her dad saw her this late out of bed, she would be in big trouble. The moment her father walked out of the shed, she swung around the corner, hoping she hadn't been seen. She watched him from around the corner and realized he hadn't seen her. When he went inside the house, she realized this was the moment she was waiting for. She could go inside. With her eyes on the back door, she walked into the shed, not expecting what she would find in there. From the moment she set foot in the shed, different kinds of emotions went through her body. She was shocked, followed by confusion, and finally, curiosity. On the table, there was a weird-looking chest or something. That's what he was making? She thought, confused. Then, she noticed a box standing in the room. Emily walked towards the table and grabbed a stool to take a look inside the box. She was shocked by the contents. The first thing she saw was a picture of her dad and a woman she didn't recognize. Who is that? She thought. She looked further and didn't know what she was looking at. Inside the box were loads and loads of pictures, not only of them together, but also solely of her. To make matters worse, it looked like some pictures were cut like other people were cut out of it, or the pictures came out of books. This is creepy. What is my dad doing? She thought. Why did her father have a box filled with all sorts of different pictures of this woman she had never seen? Why did he make some weird-looking chest in the shed? And why did he do all this in the middle of the night? Emily began to worry something was very wrong. Suddenly, she heard the back door open and close. Her father was coming back. What now? Emily thought. She decided it was best to hide inside the shed. There had to be some reason for the weird behavior of her father, and she wouldn't be able to find out what it was from outside. She hid behind an old cabinet and saw her father coming in with another box. Emily watched how her father placed the boxes next to each other and started to take out all of the contents. After that, he collected everything, threw it in the wooden chest, and then did something she never expected. Instead of just closing the lid of the chest, he started screwing it shut. And not just with a few screws. It looked like 100 of them. Once he was satisfied, he picked up the chest and went outside while quickly grabbing something on his way out, leaving Emily behind even more confused than before. For a moment, Emily was frozen in place, contemplating what she had just witnessed. Suddenly, she heard a groan coming from outside. She snapped out of her confusion and silently walked toward the door so she could try and take a look at what was happening outside, not knowing it would lead to more questions. With every step she took, she made sure she still heard the groaning from outside, so she knew her father was busy with whatever he was doing. She took a quick and cautious look around the corner, catching a glimpse of what her father was doing. Digging? She thought, surprised. This wasn't normal. Emily had seen enough and couldn't handle it anymore. She was seriously getting worried about her father and had to know what this was all about. This meant she had to confront him directly at this moment. She took a few good breaths and walked out of the shed. "Dad," she said. Her father turned around and was surprised to see his daughter walking out of the shed at this time of night. "What are you doing here?" he stammered. Emily noticed his eyes were watery and his voice sounded a little hazy. Before she could answer, her father started sobbing. "What's going on, Dad?" she asked worryingly. His body shook while he tried to step out of the hole. "I'm sorry," he answered. "I didn't mean for you to see all this." He pointed at the ground. "Dad, are you okay?" "You're scaring me," Emily said. "I'm sorry, darling, I'm fine." "No, I'm not fine," he said abruptly while walking towards her. Emily stepped to the ground and didn't know what to do as she saw her father coming towards her. Then he sat down on his knees in front of her. "You wanted to know what I'm doing, right?" he asked softly. She nodded. Then, her father told her a story she never could have imagined. He told her about the time her mother died and how he handled that pretty well, up until he got the news they had to move here a few weeks ago. It turned out her father had lived here before he met her mother and was in love with another woman, the woman in the pictures. Coming back here made him feel lonely, and all the memories of the other woman came back. He didn't know how to handle it and felt embarrassed to tell Emily. So he decided to gather all the memories in one place and bury them deep into the ground, where they wouldn't be a constant reminder. Emily hugged her father as she felt bad for him. "I'm so sorry, Daddy," she said. It pained her to see her father like this. He looked defeated and not even a little bit like the man she knew him as. She wanted to help him but didn't know what to do. Until... "I want you to be happy," she said. "Let me help you, please." Her father looked at her and smiled weakly. "What can you do, pumpkin?" he said. I can help you find her so you can talk to her again, Emily said with a big smile, not knowing it would change their lives. You would do that for me? He asked, surprised. Wouldn't you be mad? She shook her head. I want you to be happy, she answered. Her father looked to the sky as if he thanked his God for having such an understanding daughter. But how can we find her? He thought out loud. I haven't seen her since I left here, and that was a long time ago, he continued. Maybe it isn't such a good idea. Emily took his hand. Come on, Dad, don't be scared, she said. We at least have to try. Her father smiled and nodded. Then Emily thought of something. She told him they already had a good starting point while pointing at the chest. There has to be something useful in there, right? She said, full of confidence. I guess so, her father reacted. Moments later, he grabbed the chest out of the hole and brought it back inside. After a lot of unscrewing, they were finally able to open the chest. They both grabbed a handful of stuff and spread it out on the table. The content consisted mainly of pictures, but there were some other things as well. She was looking around when she realized her father was staring at a picture. What's that? She asked while joining her dad. This is my high school. This is where we met, he said. It brings back all kinds of memories. Emily looked at her father and saw a sudden change in his expression. I know it, he exclaimed. I know where to go. If I remember correctly, there is a high school reunion, he said excitedly. Emily got enthusiastic immediately. You have to go, Dad, she said. Once the day came, she helped him prepare, and they drove off together. They walked towards the school, and Emily noticed he was nervous. It will be all right, Dad, she said. Her father got overrun with nostalgic feelings once they went inside. They walked towards the main hall, and the sound of a big group of people talking became louder and louder. Her father was welcomed by a lot of different people, but to their disappointment, they didn't see the woman. Emily saw the despair slowly take over her father. Come on, she said cheerfully. We can ask around. Hoping that would help him. They went around and asked people if they had seen her or knew anything, but no one seemed to know anything until they heard someone call for them. Hopeful Emily turned around, but she was quickly disappointed. Are you looking for Alice? A woman said. Yes, we are. Have you seen her? Her father answered. Emily noticed a sliver of hope in his voice. Yes, I have heard from her, the woman said. The next thing out of her mouth would shock them. She's in the hospital, so she couldn't make it, she said. Her father's hope sunk into the ground. In the hospital, he stammered. It started looking bad, but Emily held on to a little bit of hope. Which hospital? She asked, determined to get her father and this woman together. Come on, Dad, she yelled as she ran out of the school. The woman inside confirmed that Alice was in a hospital not too far from there. It isn't over yet, don't give up. Her cheerful comments rubbed off on her father, and he had to smile a little, ready to go to the hospital. They arrived at the hospital and got directions to the correct room. This was the moment they had been working so hard for. Emily looked at her father. He looked anxious but also ready. You can do it, Dad, she said. They turned the corner and could see the room. But then, they looked in the room. There she was, the woman from the pictures, lying in bed. Sitting next to her was a man. I didn't think about that, how stupid of me, her father said. Of course, she has a husband. It truly was an emotional roller coaster of a day, but it wasn't done yet. Come on, Dad, Emily started. We made it this far. At least go and say hello. She gave him a gentle nudge toward the door. You can't leave after all this work. She saw doubt on his face as he started to realize his daughter was right. Thanks, Pumpkin, he said while opening the door. The moment he walked to the door, he was greeted by an excited yell. Henry, what are you doing here? I haven't seen you in ages, the woman in the hospital bed said. How are you? Henry, as the father was called, was glad she remembered and recognized him after all these years. I'm good, thanks, he said. I heard you were in the hospital, so I came by to check on you, but you already have company, I see. He nodded to the man next to the bed. Alice laughed as she explained it was nothing serious, and her friend came by to pick her up. Henry was relieved it was just a friend and introduced Emily to Alice. Emily was really excited to finally meet the woman her dad had once loved. They instantly started bonding, and Henry looked happy. This didn't go unnoticed by Emily as she went to him and hugged him. I love you, she said.